My name is Dorothy Evans. I'm 86 years old, and I've carried a hole in my heart for half a century. Last Tuesday evening, I sat alone in my tiny apartment in Lancaster, Pennsylvania, wrapped in my old floral robe, a cup of tea trembling in my hands. It was nearly 8 p.m., and I had just switched on the evening news like I always do. My joints ached, my bones felt like dry paper, and my breath came slower these days. But nothing prepared me for what I saw on the television screen. A segment came on. Faces of Forgotten War Heroes. It was about Vietnam veterans who never came back, and those who did but lost their families, their minds, or both. As the news anchor spoke, the camera cut to a man sitting quietly under a shaded tree. He had kind eyes, a long scar on the side of his neck, and a gaze that carried oceans of pain. I dropped the tea. My trembling fingers reached for the screen. My voice cracked in disbelief. Michael! The man on TV was older now. His face was lined with years, the color of his skin darker from the sun. His beard white, patchy, and overgrown. But that nose, that chin, and those eyes. I hadn't seen those eyes in 50 years. 50 years. My son, Michael Evans, went missing when he was 19. One day he left for the store, and he never returned. The police found no signs of foul play. No blood. No body. Nothing. He simply vanished off the face of the earth. And now, half a century later, there he was, quietly staring into space on a local TV report filmed in a Texas veterans shelter. But the strangest thing was this. They called him by a different name. Here's Mr. Walter Green. He's been at our shelter for decades. Never had any ID. Doesn't talk about his past. Just likes the birds and his bench. Walter Green. My heart seized. Why was my son living under a different name? Why didn't he contact me? Had he forgotten me? Was he hiding? I needed to know. And I was going to find him. Even if it was the last thing I did before I left this earth. But before I take you to the day he vanished, you need to understand what kind of boy Michael was. And what happened to our family, piece by piece, until I became the woman talking to a silent TV screen. Because what I found in my search would change everything I thought I knew, even the truth. And that truth began long before he disappeared. Please, come with me. This is the story of how I lost my son, and how I found him again after 50 years. Only to realize, he may never have been mine to begin with. But just when I thought the TV sighting was the answer to my prayers, something else happened that very night. There was a knock on my door. A quiet, hesitant knock. Like someone unsure if they had the right house. And when I opened it, he spoke. But it wasn't Michael. It was someone who had been hiding the truth about my son. For 50 years. If this story gripped your heart, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Next chapter will reveal the secrets they never wanted Dorothy to uncover. Stay with us. I stood frozen at the door. The man in front of me looked to be in his early 70s, with thin white hair tucked beneath a flat cap and watery gray eyes that wouldn't meet mine. He held a worn leather satchel under one arm, and a nervous smile tugged at the corner of his mouth, like he wasn't sure if he was welcome here. Mrs. Dorothy Evans? He asked in a gentle, gravelly voice. My heart thudded in my chest. Yes. Who are you? He exhaled slowly. My name is Franklin. I served with your son. In Vietnam. My knees buckled. I had to grip the doorframe to stop myself from collapsing. Franklin stepped forward, hands raised in a calming gesture. Please, may I come in? I've been carrying this for 50 years. And I think it's time you knew. My mouth opened but no words came. I stepped aside. He entered slowly, respectfully, as if walking on hallowed ground. I watched him take in my modest living room. The knit doilies, the old photos of Michael on the mantel, the fraying rug where my grandkids used to play. He stopped in front of the photo of Michael in his high school football uniform. I remember that smile, Franklin whispered. I sat down slowly, my hands shaking. You knew him. He's alive, isn't he? I saw him on TV just this evening. In Texas. They called him Walter Green, but I know my son when I see him. Please, tell me he's alive." Franklin nodded, then sat across from me, placing the satchel gently on the coffee table. "He's alive," he said softly. "But Dorothy, he doesn't remember you." My mouth dropped open. What are you saying?" Franklin opened the satchel and pulled out a stack of old letters, some blood-stained, some brittle with age. Then a dog tag. I leaned forward, my breath caught in my throat. Michael J. Evans. 110-23-5491. USMC. I choked back a sob as I touched it. "Where did you get this?" Franklin's eyes filled with pain. "Michael and I were captured during a covert operation in Cambodia. It wasn't supposed to happen. We weren't even officially there. We were tortured, starved, kept for months. When we escaped, only a few of us made it across the jungle alive. Michael was one of them. But something had changed. His mind was broken." Tears streamed down my face. "He was 19. Franklin nodded. "And when we were found by a rebel village, they took us in. But Michael didn't know who he was anymore. He had fever dreams, screamed in his sleep. He wouldn't eat unless someone fed him. He didn't speak for months." I covered my mouth in horror. "The army wrote him off as killed in action," Franklin continued. "But I couldn't forget. I went back years later as a contractor. That's when I found him again. But he didn't recognize me. He didn't recognize himself." My voice cracked. "But why didn't anyone tell me?" Franklin looked down. "Because someone made sure you didn't know. Someone in the military covered it up. There was a reason. And that's what I came here to tell you." He reached into his satchel again and pulled out a faded manila folder marked classified. I stared at it like it was a bomb. "What's in there?" I asked, barely able to breathe. Franklin hesitated. "Everything. The mission. The cover-up. What really happened to your son. But before I give it to you, I need to ask you something." I blinked, confused. "What?" "Do you remember a man named Lieutenant Carl Bridges?" The name hit me like a slap. "Yes." "He was Michael's commanding officer. He used to call sometimes. He even visited once after Michael disappeared." "Why?" Franklin nodded slowly. "Because he wasn't just his commanding officer. He was the one who ordered the mission that got Michael captured. And I believe he's the one who erased your son's name from the system." My blood turned cold. Franklin stood and paced. "And you'll never believe where he is now." "Where?" He turned toward me. "He's running for Senate. And he's using Michael's disappearance as part of his campaign, as a tragic story of heroism and loss." My mouth dropped open in disbelief. "He's still alive," I whispered. Franklin nodded. "And he's lying through his teeth." A thick silence fell between us. And then Franklin said something that made the hair on my neck stand up. "I can get you a meeting with him. But you need to be ready, because once you start digging, you'll be putting yourself in danger." My chest tightened. "Danger?" He nodded grimly. "Somebody didn't want you to find Michael. And now that you've seen him, they might come looking for you." And just as the weight of it all hit me, my phone rang. Unknown number. I picked it up, and all I heard was a mechanical voice. "Stop looking for the boy. He's better off gone." The line went dead. I dropped the phone. Franklin's face turned pale. "They know. If this story has your heart racing, don't stop now. Like, comment, and subscribe, because in next chapter, Dorothy digs into the classified truth. But the closer she gets to her son, the closer danger creeps in. Stay with us." I stared at the silent phone in my hand, its screen still glowing like an open wound. My mind reeled. The voice on the other end had been calm, cold, but the message was clear. "Stop looking for the boy." Boy. My son was nearly 70. But to whoever said those words, he was still a threat. Franklin rushed over and gently took the phone from me. "We need to be careful now, Dorothy. If they've started watching you, It means they know you saw the broadcast. I trembled as I gripped the armrest. But why? What are they hiding that's so dangerous after all these years? Franklin lowered his voice. That's what I'm going to show you. But not here. He opened the manila folder just enough for me to glimpse names, signatures, stamps, things that screamed top secret before he slipped it back inside the satchel. I've made copies, but we can't talk about this in your house. They could be listening. A deep, creeping chill crawled through my bones. For years I had prayed, begged, lit candles, walked into churches I didn't even belong to, asking for just one sign that my son was alive. And now the sign had come, with a threat hanging from its tail. Franklin rose from his seat. Get your coat. We're going for a drive. I hesitated. At this hour. He gave me a hard look. Dorothy, if we wait, someone else might come knocking. And next time they won't be asking politely. My hands shook as I reached for my cardigan. My legs wobbled like twigs. But my voice was steady. I'm ready. The night air hit my lungs like ice. We climbed into Franklin's rusted Lincoln Town car. It smelled like old paper, coffee, and tobacco. He drove without saying much, his eyes flicking to the rearview mirror every few seconds. I watched the familiar streets of Lancaster blur past, knowing I might never see them the same again. We drove to an abandoned diner just off Route 72. It had a boarded-up front window and weeds growing through the pavement, but the back door opened with a key Franklin had clearly used before. Inside, beneath a busted light and next to a cracked jukebox, he unrolled a large map on a dusty booth table. This, he said, is where it all started. March 3, 1973. Operation Broken Gate. Blink. That's where Michael was sent. Yes. Along with 23 other soldiers. But only 6 came back. The mission was so off the record, even the president may not have known. He handed me a photocopied field report. Michael's name was listed, then crossed out in red ink. Why did they say he was dead? Yes. Franklin's eyes burned with something bitter. Because it was easier. Michael saw something he wasn't supposed to. And when he survived, when he refused to keep quiet, he became a problem. I leaned forward. What did he see? Franklin hesitated, then pushed a second document across the table. It was a faded black and white photo. A jungle clearing, pile of bodies, and a group of American soldiers standing in the background, one of them with a cigarette and a smile. What is this? That, Franklin said, voice like gravel, is evidence of a massacre. Civilians, women, children, all wiped out during a botched intelligence hit. Michael found survivors. He tried to get help. And for that, they silenced him. My stomach turned. He was a hero, I whispered. He still is, Franklin said. But they couldn't risk the world knowing. That's why they erased him. Fed you a lie. Told the public he died a good soldier. Meanwhile, they shipped him off to a remote psych facility, pumped him with drugs until he forgot who he was. And when the program collapsed, he ended up on the streets, confused, nameless, and labeled a nobody. I stared at the photo again, unable to breathe. Franklin leaned in close. But I know who helped cover it up. And he's the same man running for Senate today. Lieutenant Carl Bridges, I muttered. Franklin nodded. He's made a career out of rewriting the past. But if you're willing, we can bring the truth out. We can give Michael his name back. I swallowed hard. But how? Tomorrow morning, Franklin said. You and I are going to Texas. My eyes widened. Texas. We'll go to the veterans' shelter. See him. Speak to him. Maybe, just maybe, he'll remember you. But you need to be prepared, Dorothy. He may not recognize you. He may not even want to. My voice cracked. He was my baby boy. I know. A tear slipped down my cheek as I whispered. What if I see him, and he looks at me like a stranger? Franklin took my hand gently. Then we remind him who you are. Piece by piece. Memory by memory. He nodded. But just as we stood to leave, the jukebox crackled to life. There was no power. Franklin's eyes darted toward the door. Someone's here. My breath caught in my throat. The side window shattered. A voice shouted from outside. "Drop the bag, old man." Franklin shoved the folder into my hands. "Run, Dorothy." Back door. I stood frozen. "What about you?" "I'll hold them off." "Go." Tires screeched outside. A shadow moved past the shattered glass. I clutched the folder to my chest and bolted for the back door, heart pounding like a war drum. As I fled into the cold night, I heard Franklin cry out. Then a gunshot. If you felt that twist in your chest like I did, don't leave now. Like, comment, and subscribe. Because next chapter takes us straight to Texas, and you won't believe what Dorothy finds when she finally sees the man they told her to forget. The sound of that gunshot followed me through the darkness like a ghost. I didn't look back. Couldn't. My legs barely worked, and the folder clutched to my chest felt like it weighed 100 pounds. I ran, limping, gasping, through the back alley behind the diner into the night, until I reached a gas station with flickering lights and a sleepy teenager behind the counter. I collapsed through the door, panting. "Call the police," I wheezed. "There's been a shooting." He blinked at me like I was from another planet. But he did it. By the time the police arrived, the diner was empty. The shattered glass was there. Blood on the floor. But no Franklin. They said they'd investigate, but I saw the way the officer looked at me, like I was just a scared old woman, confused and overreacting. They took my statement and promised to follow up. But Franklin was gone. And the folder, still in my hands. I didn't go home that night. I checked into a motel 2 towns over and used a fake name, something I never thought I'd have to do. I pushed the dresser in front of the door and sat on the bed, wide-eyed, afraid to sleep. I opened the folder again. Inside were military documents, photos, letters, even a transcript of a debriefing from a survivor who said that Michael Evans was last seen heading toward the river with a civilian child in his arms, before being intercepted by unknown parties. Then there was a page with redacted lines, except one name that hadn't been blacked out. Carl M. Bridges, Field Command. Under that, a hand-scrawled note from Franklin. "If anything happens to me, Dorothy, go to Shelter 17 in Waco, Texas. Ask for Father Reyes. He knows." I clutched the paper to my chest. I didn't sleep. I waited for morning like it was a finish line I might never reach. When the sun rose, I boarded the first bus headed west. I was an 86-year-old woman riding cross-country with a purse full of crackers, an old rosary, and a manila folder that people were willing to kill for. I didn't tell my daughter. I didn't tell anyone. No one had believed me when I said Michael was still out there. Not for years. And now I wasn't about to let anyone stop me from bringing him home. The bus ride to Texas was long, gritty, and cruel on my bones. But I stared out the window and saw little boys everywhere, running through fields, pressing their faces to the glass at stops, and each time my heart squeezed with pain. I kept seeing him at age 9 with skinned knees and freckles. Then again at 16, when he brought home his first paycheck and handed it to me without hesitation. Then I saw him in that uniform. Just before he left. He'd kissed my forehead and said, "I'll be back before Christmas, Ma." And then, nothing. For 50 years. Now, every mile took me closer to the man I saw on TV. The man they said was called Walter Green. I arrived in Waco with sore legs, no sleep, and a heart full of ghosts. Shelter 17 was a faded brick building at the end of a quiet street. It had a small fenced garden with bird feeders and wind chimes that made the air feel holy. I walked up to the gate. A woman in a volunteer vest greeted me kindly. "Can I help you, ma'am?" I leaned heavily on the iron fence. "I'm here to see Father Reyes." "Tell him. Dorothy Evans is here. Franklin sent me." Her eyes changed instantly. She stepped back. "One moment, please." She disappeared inside. Moments later, a man in a priest's collar came out. Mid-50s, with a silver cross hanging from his neck and eyes that had seen too much. "You must be Dorothy," he said softly. He nodded. "He's here, isn't he?" Father Reyes looked around, then opened the gate. "Come with me." He led me past the small chapel and garden into a quiet room that smelled of lavender and old books. I sat down slowly, my knees aching. "I need to see him," I said. Father Reyes sighed. "Dorothy, Walter, Michael, he's been with us nearly 30 years. He never asked about his past. Never mentioned a family. But I always suspected." He reached into a drawer and pulled out a photograph. It was Michael, seated on a bench under a tree. That same tree I saw on the news broadcast. He was feeding birds, smiling faintly. My hands trembled. "Please take me to him." Father Reyes studied me carefully, then nodded. "He's in the garden now. But I must warn you. He may not remember anything. His memory. It's fragile." "I don't care," I whispered. "I just want to see my son." We walked slowly through the corridor. I felt like I was walking toward Judgment Day. And then, I saw him, sitting under a large oak tree, wearing a flannel shirt and cargo pants, feeding seeds to a little red bird on the ground. His hair was gray now, his beard full. He had lines around his mouth and bags under his eyes. But I knew that face. That was my boy, Michael. I stepped forward, breath caught in my throat. He looked up at me. His eyes locked onto mine. For a second the world stood still. He stared. I whispered, "Michael." He blinked. "Do I know you?" A dagger twisted in my heart. I walked closer. "It's me, your mother. Dorothy. I never stopped looking for you. Never. Not for one day." He stared at me like I was a dream. Then a single tear slipped down his cheek. "You smell like lavender," he murmured. "My ma used to smell like lavender." Covered my mouth. Then he stood. Slowly. I had a dream about you," he said softly. "You were in a kitchen, baking pie, singing along to some old record." I nodded through my tears. "That was me. That was our house. That was you, Michael." He trembled. "What's happening to me?" I reached for his hand. "You're coming home, baby." He looked down at my hand and held it. And just when I thought my heart couldn't take any more, Father Reyes cleared his throat. "There's something else," he said gently. I didn't want to say anything before. But Michael wasn't alone when he came to us. I turned to him, confused. "What do you mean?" "He had a child with him. Little girl. She was maybe 6. And she called him Daddy." My heart nearly stopped. "A daughter," I whispered. Father Reyes nodded. "She was adopted years ago by a family here in Texas. But I have the name. If you want, I can help you find her." I turned back to Michael. He looked like he'd just been told the moon belonged to him. Daughter. My son had a daughter. Which meant I had a granddaughter. This story just cracked open a whole new chapter. If your heart is as full and as curious as mine, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. In next chapter, Dorothy starts a journey she never expected, to find the granddaughter she never knew she had. Stay tuned. I stood frozen beneath the old oak tree, my son's hand still trembling in mine, but my mind was already reeling toward the impossible. A granddaughter. A granddaughter I never knew existed. And she was out there somewhere, raised by strangers, growing up all these years while I mourned a son they told me was dead. The weight of that realization hit harder than the gunshot I'd heard the night Franklin disappeared. "Where is she?" I asked, my voice cracking. Father Reyes hesitated. "She was adopted by a couple from Austin about 30 years ago. A good family. But after a while, the records go quiet. She would be in her mid-30s now. Possibly with a family of her own." Michael's eyes were lost in a storm of confusion. I remember her hand, holding mine. She had a ribbon, pink I think. And she used to hum, like her mama did. My heart stung. "Who was her mother, Michael?" His face darkened. "I don't know. I see flashes. A woman running. Baby crying. But every time I try to remember her face, it disappears." He gripped his head with both hands. "Why can't I remember?" I pulled him gently into my arms. You don't have to remember it all today. We'll take it piece by piece. Together. That evening, Father Reyes gave me a name. Amanda Grace Donovan. That was what the adoption records said. Born in 1991. Adopted in 1996. The couple who took her in were missionaries. Last known location: San Antonio. I held on to that name like a rope thrown to a drowning woman. Amanda. I had a granddaughter named Amanda. And now I had to find her. But something about this whole thing still didn't sit right with me. Why had they kept Michael's daughter instead of returning her to me once he resurfaced? Why had no one even tried? I asked Father Reyes that very question. His response made the hairs on my neck stand up. There was someone who came asking about her once. Years ago. Said he was an uncle. But there was something off about him. He didn't have any paperwork. Just questions. What did he look like? Tall. Scar on his cheek. Military cut. Seemed more interested in Michael than Amanda. I felt the blood drain from my face. A scar on his cheek. That matched the photo Franklin had shown me. One of the soldiers standing behind the pile of bodies in Cambodia. With a cigarette and a scar. Carl Bridges. That snake had been sniffing around even back then. Do you think he found her? Asked. Father Reyes shrugged solemnly. If he did, he didn't do anything legal. Amanda's adoptive parents passed away years ago. She left the state shortly after. There's no digital trail. No social media. Nothing. I knew then that I had to go to San Antonio. Whatever lay ahead, I had to know the truth. Michael, though still disoriented, insisted on coming with me. I need to see her, he said. Even if she doesn't believe I'm her father. Even if she hates me. She won't, I said firmly. She'll know who you are. Because you have a heart that remembers. Even if your mind doesn't. We took the bus to San Antonio the next morning. I didn't tell anyone where we were going. Couldn't. After the warning call and Franklin's disappearance, I couldn't trust anyone. Not even the police. We arrived and checked into a budget motel with peeling wallpaper and a flickering hallway light. Michael fell asleep fast. He was still on heavy medication from the shelter. But I stayed up, combing through every local record, yearbook photo, and newspaper archive I could find. Finally, at 3:47 a.m., I found something. A community newsletter from 2013. Amanda Donovan awarded Teacher of the Year for her work with children with PTSD. There was a photo. Gasp. She had Michael's eyes. Soft, dark and solemn. Just like they were when he was 17, and handed me a bouquet of dandelions for Mother's Day. She was working at an outreach center for veterans' children. Place called the Sanctuary Project, located just 15 minutes away. I shook Michael awake. We found her. The next morning we went. The building sat behind a church. A modest structure with bright murals painted by children. Stars, handprints, and quotes like, "You are never forgotten." Inside, a receptionist greeted us with a warm smile. "May I help you?" I swallowed hard. "We're here to see Amanda Donovan." "It's urgent." She studied me. "Do you have an appointment?" "No," I said, trembling. "But I'm her grandmother. She just doesn't know it yet." The woman blinked, then picked up the phone. "She's with a student right now. But I'll let her know." We waited. Each tick of the clock echoed in my ears like a drum. Then the door opened. And there she was. Amanda. Her hair was dark brown, braided neatly down her back. Her face was soft but sharp, like a woman who had seen the world and decided to rise anyway. She had a clipboard in hand and looked slightly confused. "Yes." My voice caught. "Amanda. My name is Dorothy. Dorothy Evans." She raised an eyebrow. "I'm your grandmother." Silence. She laughed. "I'm sorry, what?" I took a step forward, tears welling in my eyes. "Your father is Michael Evans. He's alive. He's here. They told me he was dead for 50 years. But he's alive." She froze. Behind me, Michael stepped forward. She turned to him. He opened his mouth, but no words came. Then he did something unexpected. He sang. Lullaby. Broken. Raspy. Good night, sweetheart. It's time to go. Amanda's hand flew to her mouth. I know that song, she whispered. My dad. He used to hum it when I was scared. Tears rolled down her cheeks. Michael stepped forward. I don't remember everything. But I remember you. You held my finger. You used to say you were brave like a lion. And I told you. Then roar for me, little lion. He gasped. That was my nickname. He nodded. My little lion. Amanda burst into sobs and threw herself into his arms. And in that moment, for the first time in 5 decades, our broken family began to stitch itself together. But as I watched them embrace, I noticed something. Cross the street. Black SUV. Windows tinted. Engine running. Watching. Waiting. I stepped outside. Drove off. But not before I caught a glimpse of the man in the passenger seat. The scar on his cheek was unmistakable. Carl Bridges had found us. And this time, he wasn't coming alone. If this moment made your heart swell like mine did, don't forget to like, comment and subscribe. But don't let your guard down, because in next chapter, the man who stole everything returns to finish what he started. Stay close. I stood frozen on the sidewalk, heart pounding in my chest, watching the black SUV disappear into the morning traffic like a ghost. Carl Bridges had seen us. He knew we were here. And if Franklin's words were true, that Bridges had been covering this up for 50 years, then the reunion that just happened wasn't a joyful miracle to him. It was a threat. Inside the outreach center, Amanda and Michael were still holding on to each other like two people clinging to a raft in the middle of a storm. But I couldn't focus on the beauty of it, not with the storm gathering again. When I re-entered the building, Amanda wiped her tears and looked at me with wide eyes, full of wonder and confusion. I don't understand, she said. Why did no one ever tell me he was alive? Why did the adoption agency say he died in Cambodia? I sat down beside her. Because someone wanted him gone. And you along with him. Michael's hand trembled in his lap. He was still struggling with the swirl of memories flooding back. They took us after the river. I don't remember who they were. But I remember being afraid. And someone in uniform saying, "We'll take it from here." I begged them not to take her. But they separated us. Amanda gasped. That's the first memory I ever had. A man in uniform putting me in a car. I was crying. I had a pink lion in my hand. Michael's face twisted. Your lion. You called it Bravey. Amanda nodded slowly. I still have it. It's torn now, but I couldn't throw it away. The room fell silent. Then I stood, my hands shaking. We need to get out of here. Amanda blinked. What? We're being watched, I whispered. That man, Carl Bridges, he saw us. He's been tracking this story for years. He knows Michael's alive. He knows you're his daughter. And now that we're all together, he'll do whatever it takes to silence us. Amanda looked stunned. But why? Why would someone go this far? I reached into my purse and pulled out Franklin's manila folder. Because your father witnessed something that could destroy powerful people. There was a massacre. He tried to stop it. And for that, they buried him alive in silence. And now the truth is walking and breathing again. You, me, Michael, we're proof they failed. Amanda's face hardened. Then let's make sure the world knows. Michael shook his head slowly. But how? Amanda stood. I know someone. A journalist. He's local. He specializes in military cover-ups and whistleblower stories. He helped a veteran friend of mine get justice last year. If we bring him this folder, it'll be out of their hands. He nodded. Let's go now. Before they find us again. We packed our things, left the outreach center, and drove in Amanda's old hatchback through winding streets until we reached a small, nondescript office building in downtown San Antonio. The sign on the door read, David Marcus, investigative journalist. David was in his early 40s, with a coffee-stained shirt, messy beard, and the eyes of a man who'd seen far too many secrets. Amanda explained the story. He sat silently, flipping through the folder, his fingers tightening with every turn of the page. "Jesus," he muttered. This is explosive." Then he turned to Michael. "Do you remember enough to talk on record?" Michael hesitated. "Only flashes. Faces. Dreams. Fire. I see things in dreams, but I don't know what's real." David looked at me. "You're the mother. If you're willing to speak publicly, to testify that the government declared your son dead while keeping him alive under a false name, this could spark a congressional inquiry." I swallowed hard. "I've been silent for 50 years. I'm not afraid anymore." Amanda nodded beside me. "Neither am I." David smiled grimly. "Then let's do this." He began recording interviews that very day. First me, then Amanda, then Michael, who slowly, through tears and quiet shaking, began piecing together the truth buried inside him. For hours we told our story. When we left his office, I felt like a weight had lifted off my chest, only to feel it drop back down again when we saw what was waiting for us outside. A man in a suit, clean-shaven, earpiece in his ear, leaning against Amanda's car. Amanda froze. "Who the hell is that?" I recognized him immediately. He was in one of the photos from the folder, standing beside Carl Bridges during a military press event. We turned to head back into the building, but another man stepped in front of us. "Mrs. Evans." "Amanda." "Mr. Evans," he said coolly. "We'd like to have a word." David Marcus stepped out behind us, holding up his phone. "Back off. You're on camera. Try anything and I'll live stream it to 5 different outlets." The men didn't blink. One handed me a plain white envelope. "Read this carefully," he said. "We strongly advise you to reconsider your actions. There are consequences to stirring up ancient history." Amanda stepped forward. "You can't silence us. You kept my father from me my whole life. You think I'm going to be scared now?" The man smiled coldly. "You should be." Then they turned and walked away, disappearing into a second SUV parked down the block. Inside the envelope was a single sheet of paper, typed in bold. "You have 3 days. After that, this story will bury you, not the other way around." Michael's hands clenched the envelope so hard it crumpled. "No," he said softly. "No more hiding. No more threats." He looked at us, his eyes burning with something I hadn't seen in them before. Determination. "I want the world to know what they did to us." I placed a hand over his. "They will. But we have to move quickly. We need more than one reporter. We need the people. We need to go public before they can shut us down." Amanda nodded. "Let's go live. Tonight." David agreed. "I'll broadcast your story online. I'll loop in veteran rights groups, media outlets, watchdog organizations. Once it's out, it can't be stopped." I felt a deep fire in my chest. This was it. After 50 years of pain, silence, and loss, we were about to burn the lie to the ground. But just as we began setting up for the live stream in David's studio, my phone vibrated. An unknown number. I almost ignored it. And answered. A voice I hadn't heard in 5 decades whispered into my ear. "Dorothy, it's Franklin. I'm alive. But you need to listen very carefully. We're almost at the edge now. If this chapter had your heart racing, don't let go yet. Like, comment, and subscribe, because in next chapter, the man who vanished with the truth returns. And what he says will change everything again. Stay with us." My hands trembled as I held the phone to my ear, barely breathing. "Franklin," I whispered. "Is it really you?" His voice was low, shaky, and hoarse, like a man recovering from something worse than just a wound. "Yes, it's me. I don't have much time." Tears welled in my eyes. "I thought you were. They said you were gone. There was blood. A gunshot." "They didn't kill me," he cut in. "They took me." My knees buckled, and Amanda grabbed my arm to steady me. I put the call on speaker, the whole room going still as Franklin's voice filled the air. They found me after I left the diner. It was Bridges' men. They wanted the folder but I lied. Said I destroyed it. They beat me, left me in some old storage unit for 3 days. I only got out because someone tipped off a retired cop who owed me a favor. Michael stepped closer to the phone. Franklin, it's me. It's Michael. I saw the photos. Folder. Saw her. My daughter. She's here with me. Franklin paused, then whispered. Michael. Thank God. I prayed you'd remember something. I prayed that you'd hold on. Amanda wiped tears from her cheeks. Franklin's voice grew more urgent. Listen to me, going public is dangerous. They won't just threaten you this time. Bridges has more than just influence. He's protected by a private security firm that used to be a military contractor. Men with no rules, no limits. If you expose this, you'll be taking on a machine. But, he hesitated. It's the only way. I gripped the phone. Then help us, Franklin. Help us finish this. There was a long breath on the other end. There's one last piece. Something not in the folder. Something I kept in case they ever found me. A voice recording. The original debriefing tape of Michael's mission. It proves the massacre happened. It has Bridges' voice ordering the cover-up. It even names the civilian targets. My heart stopped. A tape. Amanda whispered. Where is it? Franklin answered slowly. I hid it years ago. Back when I knew I'd become a target. It's buried in a field outside Fort Stillwater, behind the abandoned communications tower. It's marked with a red flag under a rusted pipe. You'll find a metal box. Amanda turned to David. We need to get there. Now. David nodded. That tape will be the nail in the coffin. Michael looked lost in thought. I remember that tower. Think I was there. I remember the sound of the river. And the birds. The jungle. Franklin's voice dropped low. That's because they took you there before they wiped your mind, Michael. That tower was used to break prisoners. You survived hell. Michael swallowed hard. Dorothy, Franklin said. This is your moment. They can't stop the truth forever. But you need to move fast. Once you dig up that tape, you go live. You play it. Let the world hear what they buried. Then the call cut off. No goodbye. No warning. Just silence. Amanda looked at me. We have to go. Michael stood taller than I'd seen him in days. Let's finish this. We loaded into Amanda's car and began the long drive to Fort Stillwater. It was dusk when we arrived. A ghostly orange glow stretching across the horizon as we approached the old communications tower. It stood crooked, rusted and half swallowed by the weeds of time. Behind it was the field Franklin described. We split up, combing through the grass. Michael was the one who found the pipe. Over here, he shouted. We ran over. Beneath the pipe was a patch of red fabric, barely visible under the dirt. Together we dug. Our hands blistered, shaking, frantic. Finally, Amanda hit something metal. She pulled out a rusted box with a dented lock. David broke it open with a tire iron from the trunk. Inside was a small reel-to-reel tape and a cassette copy. Amanda pulled it out, holding it like a sacred relic. David slipped the cassette into a handheld recorder. Tape hissed. Then came the voices. Lieutenant Bridges, the villagers weren't armed. There were women, children. Orders were orders. You do what you're told or you disappear like Evans. Evans? You mean Private Michael Evans? He saw too much. Don't worry. The jungle will swallow him. His mom'll get a flag and a folded letter. That's all she needs. My blood ran cold. Amanda dropped to her knees. Michael was shaking. Rage and grief pouring from every inch of him. David looked at me. This is it. This is the end of their lie. That night we returned to his studio. Midnight we went live. He introduced the story, laid out the documents, the photographs, the history. Then I spoke. I told the world what it was like to lose a child and never get a body. What it was like to carry hope in silence while being told I was crazy. How they told me to forget. Then Amanda spoke, as the daughter born in secret, raised in lies, and now, finally reunited with a man she'd only seen in her dreams. And finally, Michael. He spoke slowly, but clearly. He told them what he remembered, what he endured, and how Bridges had buried him alive, in mind and in identity. Then David played the tape. By sunrise it had been watched over 1.2 million times. By noon it was on every major network. Senate candidate accused of cover-up in decades old war crime. Vietnam veteran found after 50 years speaks out. Daughter reunited with missing father thanks to TV broadcast. My phone rang non-stop. Offers for interviews. Apologies from the Department of Veterans Affairs. Even a direct message from a retired general saying, "You were right. We failed you." But none of that compared to the news that came the next morning. Carl Bridges had resigned. The story had detonated everything. He was under investigation. His private security firm shut down. Multiple whistleblowers came forward. The army launched an internal review. But the biggest shock came when a letter arrived at our motel door. No return address. Inside was a single photograph. It was Michael, age 19, standing with a Vietnamese woman holding a baby. Written on the back, "You had more than one child." I dropped the photo. Amanda picked it up, eyes wide. Michael stood stunned. "A sister," she whispered. And that was when the doorbell rang. We opened the door. And standing there was a young woman in her 40s. Dark hair, almond eyes, a nervous smile. "I think we share the same father," she said. "If your heart is pounding, you're not alone. Like, comment, and subscribe, because next chapter brings the stunning final truth. A family once shattered is now whole again. But some wounds still bleed. Don't miss the emotional conclusion." The woman standing at the door looked like a photograph had stepped into reality. She was tall, elegant, with a presence that made the room still. Her almond-shaped eyes glistened with nerves, and her long dark hair curled softly against her shoulders. She held a folded letter in one hand and clutched a worn canvas bag to her chest. "I'm sorry to come without calling," she said, her voice lightly accented. "My name is Lean. Lean Donovan." Amanda blinked. "Donovan." Lean nodded. "I was adopted by an American missionary couple after the war. My birth mother. She told me my father's name once. Michael Evans." I looked to Michael. His body went rigid. He was pale, shaking. Amanda reached for his hand. Lean stepped forward, cautiously, like she might break if we looked at her too hard. "I saw the story. The video. The photo they showed, the one of my mother and me, it was real. That was the only picture I had growing up. She said my father was a soldier. Kind man. But she never saw him again." Michael covered his mouth with his hand, eyes filling with tears. "I remember her. She hid me in a barn when the gunfire started. She gave me water, and a photograph. She said, 'You come back for your daughter.'" He looked at Lean. "And I never did." Lean stepped forward, tears now spilling. "You didn't know. I understand." Amanda stood in stunned silence. I watched both young women, so different and yet unmistakably cut from the same soul. Amanda broke the silence first. She stepped forward and wrapped Lean in a tight hug. "You're my sister," she whispered. Lean choked a sob. "I prayed my whole life that I wasn't alone." Michael dropped to his knees. "I didn't protect either of you," he whispered. "I was supposed to, and I failed." I knelt beside him, gripping his shoulders. "No, you survived. And now you have the chance to heal them. To love them. That's not failure, son. That's grace." The next few days passed in a blur of tears, laughter, and rediscovery. Amanda and Lean sat late into the night comparing stories. Different mothers, different continents, but the same longing in their bones. Michael was quieter, but more present. Every day, a little more of him returned. I saw it in the way he smiled. In the way he touched the shoulder of each daughter when he spoke. We appeared together on national news. A veteran once forgotten, now the centerpiece of a nationwide reckoning. Congress opened formal hearings. The Department of Defense launched a full investigation into classified Cold War-era missions. Carl Bridges was indicted for obstruction of justice and conspiracy to commit fraud. And Franklin, he disappeared again, but not before leaving one final message in a note mailed to our motel. "You did it. You freed him. If I disappear again, know this. I died knowing we beat them. Tell Michael I never stopped believing. Franklin." We framed that note. Weeks later we returned to Lancaster, Pennsylvania. Not to hide but to come home. Michael moved into my small home. We cleared out the room that had been his before he vanished. Amanda and Lean both took turns visiting each weekend. On the front porch, beneath the same wind chimes that had once been silent for decades, we sat in the evenings and listened to the birds. Michael often hummed lullabies. And now, when he did, he had 2 daughters humming with him. And me. I sat with my hand in his, eyes closed, and whispered prayers of thanks into the wind. But the story didn't end there. One morning, as we read the newspaper together, Amanda gasped. She pointed to a headline. "Mass grave discovered near Cambodian River. Potential link to Cold War cover-up." Underneath it a picture. A jungle clearing. And a cross with a familiar name. Elena Nguyen. Loved and lost. Mother to Lean. Lean burst into tears when she saw it. That day we held a private memorial. We planted a tree in her name in our backyard. Amanda carved a heart into the bark. Michael sat quietly, whispering something none of us could hear. "I promised to come back," he said finally. "And now I have." The last piece of the past had been laid to rest. And from its ashes our family rose again. Stronger. Together. Whole. To this day people still send us letters. Veterans. Widows. Lost children. They tell us our story helped them hope again. They say, "Thank you for not giving up." But the truth is, I almost did. I almost stopped believing. Almost. And yet something kept me going. Something as small as a mother's instinct. Something as quiet as a lullaby. Something as strong as love. 'Cause the truth is, when they tell you your child is gone, without a trace, you don't just forget. You carry them in your bones. Until one day 50 years later you look up at the television and see the eyes you've been dreaming of. If this story touched your soul the way it touched mine, please like, comment and subscribe. Because somewhere out there, someone is still waiting to be found. And your hope might be what brings them home.